At noon every Thursday, we have a free presentation to members of the community. We do that until Christmas, and then we take a break, and then in the winter we get back together with that, and we do it until May. It's all free for the community, and we have, as things get rolling in the winter, we tend to have a lot more people coming, but we're really pleased that you came, and you're going to be pleased you did too, because this whole series has been is supported by the M.S. Worthington Foundation, and this particular visit that I'm going to describe to you in a moment is supported by the Froelich Hall Foundation, Beverly Hall, who's with David Billings, and the foundation has enhanced the cultural life of Nantucket substantially, and we're really thankful for that. Beverly, thanks so much, and for coming today too. Tonight, the Waterfall Pollacks will be giving a concert, and I really hope you can come back for that because they are fantastic. Let me tell you, I put some of the upcoming programs up in front of you, so please take note of that. And also, rather than get into the specifics of biographies, I just wanted to tell you that the serendipitous way that I've met these wonderful people. Paula and Sky Henderson in the front row here live in Upper Swell in the Cotswolds. And Peggy and I were on vacation a couple of years ago, and we figured what could make a vacation better than to get together with kindred spirits who share a love for the Nantucket Historical Association. So one of our supporters in London hosted a gathering. Around that table were Sky and Paula Henderson. And I think we might have just sat together, or just in passing, Peggy and I related our love of Northern California and our love of a particular town called Mendocino. Paula's eyes lit up, and she said, and what did you say? You've got to meet Susan Waterfall. I said, just the last name alone makes me want to meet her. So the next time we were out there, I just called, and we got together, and we've become fast friends since. So today we're here because I had the privilege of sitting next to Sky and Paula in London, who told me about these talents. We went out there, and what I learned from them in a very brief time was that Mendocino, which we already knew, is a town not unlike Nantucket. It had its heyday of industry, not whaling, but for them it was redwood. 7 billion running feet of redwood was mined out of the forest east of Mendocino during the heydays when they were building San Francisco and all of the Northern California cities, that many houses of that age, 1850s, 60s, 70s, were built of redwood. That's fortunately stopped, but then the forests are back. But that town, after the decline of the Redwood Empire, it went into a big sleep, very much like Nantucket, and came out of it even more like Nantucket to become an art colony and a very, very magnetic resort on the coast of California north. It's a beautiful place. It's built by people from Connecticut, so the architecture looks like a New England town, so much so that Nathaniel Benchley's Nantucket book, The Off-Islanders, was of course set on Nantucket, but it was filmed in Mendocino, California. How interesting is that? So like the East, that John Steinbeck, who wrote half of East of Eden, ensconced it. The movie with James Dean is set in Mendocino, California. If you've seen is it Miss Marple? Who is the detective?
No, Murder, She Wrote.
Murder, She Wrote. If you've ever seen Murder, She Wrote, that's Mendocino. You've got to go. It's a beautiful town, made more beautiful by the fact that the Waterfall Pollacks live there. And every year for the past 29 years, they have infused the air, the coastal air of Nantucket with a 2-week program called the Mendocino Music Festival, which is dynamite. Now, I've never been there, but I've heard a lot about it and watched a lot on YouTube and learned about it from them. We'll all be learning from them today about the Mendocino Music Festival, and maybe someday we can all go out there together. It'd be great. But thanks for coming to the first Brown Bag. Many more to come. And would you please welcome the Waterfall Pollack family.
going to use this one. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to find out about us. Bill already gave the first 10 minutes of what I was going to say in a better way than I could have possibly said it. I would just add about the things that are different, or I should say the same about Nantucket and Mendocino. I mean, they're both really cut off. Of course, Nantucket is more cut off, but you have a really hard drive to get to Mendocino. Here, why don't you put up the...
Why don't we introduce Julian?
Oh, wait a second. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is Allan Pollack. I'm Susan Waterfall, and this is our son, Julian. All right. So
He's not going to talk as much as we are.
Yeah. He'll say something. So, okay, there it is. These are pictures of pictures, so they're not so great, but, you know, that's just what we could find. That was, you could actually see the tent in the lower right-hand corner there, but of course that wasn't there. It's only there about 3 weeks of the year. Anyway, you can see that it's a peninsula, and, you know, to get there is a really, really hard drive through forest, and it's about 3 hours north of San Francisco. And the weather there, like it is here, is a major player. Nature is a major feature of life, and that's, I think, probably something we all really love about living in these places. Like Bill said, you know, the town came from the 1850s, New Englanders, New England style architecture. You'll see more of that in subsequent pictures. And maybe there were some refugees from Nantucket, since it was the 1850s. There might have been a few that, you know, decided to go to become lumbermen instead of doing the gold rush thing. But anyway, that all happened, but it was over by the end of World War II. Lumbering was completely over, and Mendocino and all the towns along the coast went into the deep sleep that Nantucket did, and then woke up to art colony and tourism. And so that started in Mendocino in 1955 or so. There started to be an art center there, and, you know, it's kind of just gone on from there. So I got there in 1970. I came from Chicago, and I was really into the back to the land thing. I bought a farm, and I had it certified organic in 1971, and I grew vegetables. And since it was an art colony, I was happy that I could keep on teaching piano and, you know, give some concerts. So there was 13 years of that with numerous adventures, but we won't go there. In 1983, I met Allan, and he's going to tell you now about what he was doing.
And I changed her life. Before I met Susan, I hate to even mention this, but there's so many of us from New Trier High School that it's hard not to mention both Sky and Paul are from New Trier, and I remember Susan, she was older than I was, and Sky, you and I were on tri-ship together. So I remember all those days, and when I reached the ripe old age of 18, I fled from Chicago because there wasn't much jazz, much culture, much music happening there, and I made it out to Berkeley in 1966, right in the middle of the free everything movement, and immediately felt that I was at home. And of course, like most musicians that do music for the rest of their lives, you usually know at a pretty young age, like just when you hit consciousness that music's going to be your life. It happens because you just love it so much that even though you know it's going to be a rough road, there's just not much else you can do. So I went out to California in 1966 and went to school and played around the Bay Area, taught everywhere, played saxophone, played clarinet, played in orchestras, conducted orchestras, was basically having a musical ball. And when I met Susan, I was just in the middle of getting my PhD in composition from UC Berkeley. When I met her, I actually threw my PhD composition, which was an orchestra piece, in the wastebasket mistakenly, and woke up one morning and turned to Susan and said, I can't find this piece I've been working on.
Where's my piece?
I've been working on for 2 years. We looked everywhere and finally found it in the wastebasket. But it was a huge musical life I was living until I met Susan, and she was living in Mendocino, which is 3 hours away from Berkeley. And I had had a marriage before that, and Susan had definitely lived before I met her. She was 38.
I think we're digressing here.
Oh, and I was 35. And we just started commuting. But, well, you need to know these things. It's a lot more interesting
No, we
than
have a
land
lot of
formations.
pictures. I think we should move
These
forward.
are, oh, heavens.
To the
okay.
festival itself. We got the idea that we
They
wanted to
love it.
have our own, well, people always do chuckle about that, but we wanted to have a music festival. We wanted to have an orchestra. I wanted to play concertos. Allan wanted to conduct. He wanted to write music for orchestra or for whatever. We wanted to present the kind of music that we loved. And at that time, we were really into Wendell Berry. I don't know if any of you know who Wendell Berry is. He's a Kentucky essayist and poet and farmer. And, you know, we love his works. And he's one of the people that really defined place and the idea of the importance of the, you know, the actual geography and community where you live and how much that represents. And of course, so much of our modern life is devoid of that. No one and anybody could be anywhere. It's, you know, we're so fortunate if we live in a place that really speaks to us. So anyway, we wanted to have music for that. And we were, of course, also hoping to improve the musicality and the musical chops of the people that were living up there by bringing in other people to play with them.
There was a very humble little orchestra up there made up of, I don't know, 25 people. And when I started going up there, they asked me to guest conduct, and it was very sweet. And Susan played a piano concerto. And so there was actually another person up there named Walter Green, and there he is right now. He's no longer with us. He's playing the bassoon. Walter played in the San Francisco Symphony, opera orchestras, and was really, really quite well known and quite a character, and became quite a friend. And shall I continue and
go
talk?
ahead.
And
Talk about
so
the first year.
Susan and I woke up one morning, literally having our coffee, and said, "Why don't we start a music festival?" I know it's hard to believe, but that's kind of how things can begin. You just get an idea, and of course it was completely dumb. We had no idea how you do anything except play music. And we immediately started going around to different people and saying, "Hey, we got this great idea for a music festival. You know, we can get these, you know," well, we had all sorts of ideas. And then we saw Walter. The great thing about Walter is all of his buddies were playing in the San Francisco Symphony and in the opera orchestra. And we all three got together and said, "Well, why don't we have a festival where all your buddies come up? Allan will conduct, Susan will play, you'll play in the orchestra, and they'll play with the locals. And it'll really help the locals get better, because if you play next to somebody that great, you know, it will be a fabulous, fabulous thing for them. It'll be a community experience." So this is how all the Wendell Berry stuff worked into it. Not only was the place rooted in that gorgeous, gorgeous place called Mendocino, but there was a real community there, a community of musicians that we were trying to train and help with all these people from the city.
And I think we also felt that we had something to share with specialists that were coming from an urban area. And it did prove to be the case, ultimately, that we wove a community together with mostly musicians from the Bay Area, but, you know, also from all over the U.S. And a lot of people actually ended up moving to Mendocino so they could, you know, they loved it that much.
And what we did then was just talk to people, and finally had a meeting at our house, which was then Susan's house. And we had about 15 or 20 people there. They had a little bit of an idea why we had to come there, and we said, "We're starting a music festival." We gave them champagne and strawberries. And we said, "Can we see a show of hands of everybody that would like to be on the board?" And that is how our first board began. It was that simple.
So let's show a few pictures of the
So what we
first
did is
year.
we tried to, and when we all signed up for this, we had no idea where we were going to even hold the festival, because there was no venue in Mendocino large enough for this event. So what happened was that the Park Service called us up and said, "I understand you're going to have a music festival. Would you like to use our grounds?" We said,
Yeah,
"Well, of
right
course."
on the coast. It was
And
unbelievable.
it was a miracle. And then we had these board members. We said, "Well, what are we going to do now? Let's get a tent." And before we knew it, a board member was ordering a tent. "Well, what are we going to do about a stage?" "Oh, we'll get some people together and we'll build a stage." So we built a stage, Sue, we had, some boards behind it to reflect the sound. I think you put up some hippie flowers
I
that year.
put some like strong artificial flowers. I mean, it was very, very humble, but it was very sweet.
And
But those were the beginnings. So,
And that was our first tent.
yeah, which was
which
kind
was-
of an eyesore, true.
We tried to get even more
You'll
garish
see
colors,
that
but
we upgraded very soon from that, but we have fond feelings for the blue and yellow
it
tent.
wasn't available. We had a budget of about $70,000, and that is our very first performance. You can see I had a white tux, which I never wore again, and it was a very small orchestra in a very small tent. I could even point out my parents sitting there in the tent at our very first performance. And we had at our first festival, was very ambitious. We had 4 orchestra concerts, and we had 4 classical chamber music concerts. And I think the next picture shows a picture of Susan in 1987.
Yeah, that was my solo concert in the opening
She
year.
played a solo concert that year. And, nobody knew what was going to happen. It was a small town. We were trying to do something that was actually absurd. I mean, there were so few people there. I think there's about 20,000 people living all up and down the coast. And, back then there were newspapers, and I'll never forget the headlines. They said, the headlines read, "They did it," because we actually had made a profit. That every concert was sold out, and we made a profit that year of $7,000. And we were ecstatic. And I have to say, in 1987, that $7,000 went a lot further.
Yeah, I wish proportionally we were running that much in the black now.
And then another important event happened.
Yes,
to us.
another very unforeseen event happened.
Go
And
ahead.
that was that Julian came along. So that was like the second year of the festival. Julian was born 2 weeks before it started, which was completely crazy for us because we were doing it again. And Julian, of course, that picture is the following year. The first year, he was just a tiny baby. And, he came to every concert and every rehearsal. And at one point, I realized that he never cried while he was sitting and listening in front of blasting musical instruments. And I became terrified that he was deaf because it seemed so unnatural that he wouldn't. But he loved it. He was passed around from musician to musician, and he became the festival baby. So that, kind of give a personification to the growth of the festival. So for the next, so that first year, 4 orchestra concerts, 4 chamber music concerts, Julian and the festival growing up together through time. Now we're on this is our 29th year, and Julian is 26. I don't know why the years are like that, but it's something weird. But anyway, we now have 28 performances and 13 open rehearsals. And we're going to show you now what the thing looks like.
After you saw
today.
that very humble purple and yellow tent, this is now what our tent looks like when we put it up.
And you can see the New England architecture.
It takes, the festival, usually the tent has to be put up about 3 weeks to a month before the festival starts. And it's a huge stage that we put up. We have huge machines that put up the tent poles, and the whole town is abuzz as this thing starts going up. Here's another picture of the tent on the headlands. On that side is where you enter. That side is the ocean. And we always like to joke, if you have a bad performance, you can always just jump off a cliff when the performance is over, because it really is right on the edge of the ocean. And one of our little, I guess, I don't know what but when we have our publicity, music on the edge of the ocean, because it's music, being on the edge is very cool, and being on the edge geographically is also very cool. And of course, you probably can't tell, but this tent is a lot larger than our first tent, which held about 400 people in the audience. This is now, what you're looking at is a 16,000 square foot tent. And I believe the next photo is the inside of the tent. This was taken just this year. As I was rehearsing, you can see me there in front of the orchestra, and you can see looking all the way back into the tent. You can maybe see, well, it's hard to see, but our tech booth is way in the back.
And you can see the art. We feature local artists on the walls.
And you can see lighting on the scaffolding above. No longer do we have clip-on lights, but we have very sophisticated
I mean,
lighting.
it's really acoustically engineered now, and we have really good sound for being in the tent.
And then this is what it looks like on the outside of the tent. We have flags. On this side, you can see there's a concession tent. It's actually a little bit brighter on this computer. But you can see there's a concession tent. People come and they can buy wine, they can buy beer, cookies before the performance. And I used to watch from there's a little house you can see in the background that's a historical preservation building. And I used to watch the entire community come just before the performances, and it was really lovely to watch them gather together.
It's really one of the great binding things of the community, which is actually very close-knit anyway, but the fact that, there are so many events in a short period of time, everyone sees each other night after night and sees each other in all these various contexts, but they're all kind of related to music. And it's really beautiful when people are standing out like that and the sun is setting, and it's a great affirmation of community.
This is another view of the tent at night. And there's actually been some extraordinary shots of the tent at night, not at all times of the day, actually, but we can't go through all of them or we'd be here all day. We just thought it might be fun for you to see a picture of the tent being made ready after an orchestra rehearsal for another act or another show that was coming in. We hang curtains, and it's quite something to put on 28 performances in just a very short period of time.
All of the performances aren't in the tent, but the tent is used constantly. It's, getting tent time is like the hardest thing, and we're just masters at transforming that stage space. I mean, when the opera is presented, the orchestra is behind, way behind and behind a scrim, and then we have, intimate chamber music things. It's constant transformation. And the tent itself is a transformation because it's like not there for at least, 50 weeks of the year. And then suddenly it's back and it's just like it was. But there's something very magical about that.
And we thought you might like to see a picture of our closing concerts as they look most seasons. That's the chorus and orchestra. And the chorus is made up mostly of community members, countywide. It's a countywide chorus. And it's a very meaningful experience for these people because the orchestra that you see in front of them is a professional orchestra, and they never get to work with a professional orchestra. And the chorus prepares for months in order to be able to sing with us. It's really quite a moving moment. This is a picture of our very first opera. Walter Green played in the San Francisco Opera, and he turned to me at one point and said, "Listen, we got to put on an opera." And this is one of our...
You said, "I hate opera."
Well, I did until I started conducting opera. and now I adore opera, and it's the most fun thing to conduct. This is our performance of Puccini's Gianni Schicchi, which is a one-act opera and funny and, of course, gorgeous, as all Puccini's operas are. And then this is a more recent production of, can you guess what this one is? Carmen.
And
There
can see
he is,
the subtitles.
Toreador on guard. Then we also have...
Wait a second, let me just say that we've done 19 operas. And we've actually done 22 operas because 3 of the operas we've done twice. But we've done a lot of opera. And that's, kind of always the kind of centerpiece.
And then, this is the orchestra. We shove the orchestra back. Sometimes we have dancers. And this is flamenco. And believe me, this woman is a knockout. Her name is Fanny Ara. I always thought being a dancer and having the name of Fanny is a good idea. And she's been to the festival a few times, and we usually do, obviously, Spanish music, and she really can dance great. And then this is another picture of the orchestra performing, and this is David McCarroll playing whichever violin concerto. She's been there a couple of times. This may have been the Sibelius violin concerto. People went crazy over him. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this, we have a big band performance every year. And if you look hard, way on the piano is Julian, and I'm running the band.
It's an electric keyboard, so he's on the far side. You can see him there.
And this is our most popular, consistently popular event. We sell out on this. The whole people were fighting for tickets last year. As a matter of fact, one of our sponsors nearly abandoned us because the office people didn't know he was a sponsor, and he couldn't get tickets. So it's very, very, very popular. We have singers, and there's another picture. There's I am taking a saxophone solo in front of the band. And you can see the lighting's really cool. It's a very glamorous night. It's fun to get out there, have dinner beforehand, dress up, have some wine, go listen to the big band. And this year we were doing a tribute to Aretha Franklin, and that was really fun.
It was fabulous.
And here's Susan. Susan, why don't you tell them what you do?
So I'm in charge of the educational component, and in this is just one. I've done about 22 shows of various information, focusing on certain composers or periods of history. And this one was just a random one that we had. This is the original personnel from Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time. I was talking about that piece. It was in connection with music that had been written during the Holocaust and, during the Nazi thing. So go on, show the other one then. Then I did one on China. We did music of Bright Sheng and other composers whose lives had been, who had been born in China and lived through the Cultural Revolution and then came to the United States and had careers, and we performed that music. And then it's always multimedia, using, pictures of the era so we can enhance that way. Okay, well, this is Frederica von Stade. She came last summer. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a, very respected and wonderful opera singer.
She sang with all the greats. She sang at the Met, and we couldn't believe she was going to come to our festival.
Yeah, well, we're lucky because she happens to live in Marin County. She
and
was great, though.
She was very undiva-like.
Yeah, she was terrific.
Which was
and she's
great.
very interested in education, so we're hoping to get into some projects with her along those lines.
And our family really is a very eclectic bunch. We love all kinds of music. I mean, people have sort of, in the past, pigeonholed us as, sort of classical. And the festival was classical at first, but, I grew up playing jazz. And Susan's father played jazz, her mother sang jazz. And we just love all kinds of music. That's all there is to it. And we sort of all feel, Julian feels the same way too, that there's no reason to have any borders. And there's only two kinds of music, as Duke Ellington said, good music and bad music. And so we have brought up all different kinds of music. Here you see a bluegrass group. This may be the Steeplechase Rangers. I'm not quite sure which one this was, but
we have bluegrass almost every year.
Every year. People love bluegrass.
And, the classical musicians, come and hear these bluegrass fiddlers and their jaws are dropping because of the technique.
Totally intimidated. And this is Irma Thomas. I don't know if you know Irma Thomas. She's the queen of the Delta Blues. You can go on YouTube and you can see her singing with B.B. King. Well, she came out last year.
With a bunch of New Orleans musicians.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are really from New Orleans. And her husband not only had a New Orleans accent, but he stuttered. So when I talked to him, I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. But I smiled, and everything went on great. This is Shamika Copeland. Shamika Copeland is a great singer. And I just wanted to show you her picture, because this really is, that's what the show looked like. That crowd was going crazy by the time the show was over. And then we had taiko. These are taiko drummers.
We've had a lot of world music. We've had Tibetan monks. We've had gamelan, Indian music, African music, Brazilian music from the Andes, and tango, lots of tango. And we have Celtic almost every year.
And all this on a $500,000 budget. If you can imagine putting up a tent and getting all these acts together, putting on opera, putting on big band, having all these acts, having famous people come. I mean, we're basically begging people to come to the festival. But the one thing we've managed to do is communicate to the world that we are a music festival. We are devoted to the art. And it's unlike some of these bigger, more commercial things where, people expect to be paid a lot. They come in, they're treated like, just another act. People come to Mendocino, they're loved. We meet them, we love them. And they can just smell it. I mean, not only is it gorgeous up there, but they know that the only thing that keeps this thing going is the fact that those of us running it just love music. I mean, we're not doing it to make money. And we've understood that, and we have accepted it, and we've lived a life like that. But people that come up love coming up, and they all want to come back because it's a place where they can perform, and and be appreciated and feel like they're amongst their peers that are all trying to do the same thing and do great things. And then
And they're housed, all of our artists are housed. Some of them choose to stay in hotels, but a lot of people, and the whole orchestra and a lot of people are all, stay with families. And these bonds, grow over the years. And some people have been staying together for like 15, 20 years. And the relationships, are really weaving a wonderful fabric
and a
of
few
community.
people have bought homes up there as well. And so they almost love Mendocino more than they love the musicians love to come up to Mendocino and play in the orchestra because the orchestra is so different than the symphony and the opera, where it's a very difficult scene. And we just love them up there, and they just can't wait every year to come back up, and they'll hug me and say, oh, it just feels so great to be back. I feel like I can breathe again. And somehow or another, when we make music together, you can sort of feel the deep breaths, which is one of the founding visions of the festival. I always felt, and Susan always felt, that you got to have an environment like that really to make great and communicative music. And then Julian, of his many talents, which he will not brag of any, and I'm not going to embarrass you, Julian, but because he comes from parents like us, with a background of all sorts of different kinds of music, does many things. He plays jazz piano. When he was a kid, he was playing bass, he played guitar, he was playing drums. He's great, with electronic mix. He can play beautiful classical music, though you probably couldn't even pay him enough money to play a classical piece at this point.
He's playing one tonight,
He's
though.
playing one tonight. We finally twisted his arm. He plays great jazz. He's come out with many, many jazz CDs, writes music, and he's written a bunch of orchestra music, which is really great. And he happened to write an orchestra piece for piano and orchestra, and it was premiered in Sacramento with an orchestra that I conducted. It was then played in Jackson, Michigan, with Steve Osmond conducting.
Orchestra.
And then we did it at the festival, and this is a picture of our performance with Dad beating time and Julian playing the piece. And this is when I believe may have been the last chord of the piece.
Those facial expressions look extremely familiar to me because when Julian was a baby and he'd be in his crib, those are the kinds of faces that Allan would be making at him as he
Sneaking
approached
up on
the
the crib.
crib.
Any rate, the pieces that Julian have written are really fabulous. And I'm not going to embarrass you too much, but there's a lot of junky music that's being written these days, and Julian happens to write beautiful and very communicative music. This is a picture of Julian playing with his trio in the tent, and this is a very fabulous photo by Nick Wilson, and we just wanted you to see that we got into the San Francisco Chronicle. This is
The
just
cover
of the San Francisco.
of the entertainment page.
And it's entitled Helping the Pollack Family Biz, but we wouldn't have gotten into the Chronicle without Julian.
Au
Because
contraire, I was on the cover of it this summer. I did a Bach Fest, a 4-day Bach festival, and we did make the front page of that again.
I'm just not cute enough. Okay, what can we say?
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Any rate, and this is a picture of Julian playing an instrument called the talk box. He's got a tube in his mouth, and the sound comes from the synthesizer, goes into his oral cavity, is mic'd out, and it's like nothing you ever heard. He is not plugged in as much as from his hair. You might look like that he's into an electric outlet, but he's just really into it right there. Now, there are other venues that we also have around the town of Mendocino. Susan, you can
Yeah,
describe.
this one is Preston Hall, which was given to the town, or the money for it was given to the church so that there could be a really nice hall. This has the most beautiful acoustics. And so we have a lot of concerts there, smaller concerts, chamber music, but we also have the piano series there, which I've been doing, I guess since a really long time. And we have at least 3 pianists a year, and then they talk about the music that they're playing. So it's very educational and very intimate, and it's just been a terrific thing. I'm very proud of it. Yeah, this is Preston Hall. This is our, I think it's 1860 Presbyterian church. It's a beautiful church, so we have music in there.
It's a sanctuary.
Sanctuary.
It's a sanctuary.
Yeah, that's the sanctuary. The other thing is like a separate building. And then up in Fort Bragg, we use a number of venues around, but this one we use a lot, the Evergreen Methodist Church. So there you can see, I think that's the emerging artists we have kids come up and play in the orchestra and do chamber music.
Now here, this picture is a really important picture because you all know that the economy took a big nosedive in 2008 and following, FF, right? And we really struggled to keep going. And we had been renting our tent for all that time, and the musicians in the orchestra got together and raised $50,000 to help us purchase our tent. And this picture was taken at a time when we had gotten the tent. That, I don't know if you know how extraordinary that is, but to have musicians take over like that and say, we are not going to see this thing die, is really amazing. And, you know, it made us realize we were doing the right thing, because that's what we wanted. We wanted this to be a place for musicians. And so this picture is there. I won't point out all the people in this, but it was really a very momentous occasion. And that, of course, leads us to this picture, which is a picture of our volunteer appreciation party. And we hold this every year because we have 200 to 300 volunteers working on the festival every year, without whom we couldn't put this thing on. I mean, we house all the musicians, the orchestra members. If we had to pay for this housing, it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars more. And when you're working on a $500,000 budget, you just can't afford it.
And of course, our board is, you know, they're the top tier volunteers, or, well, they work, our board is a working board. They work very, very hard year-round. And
it's basically a volunteer organization. Even if you get paid, it's so minimal that it's really all about the music. And so we thought we'd have a few parting comments with the tent standing there.
how are we doing for time?
We're
Because we do
doing
want to
terribly.
open this up to,
We're going to play just a little bit for you in just a moment or two. But we want to talk a little bit about, you know, it might be interesting for us to convey to you, and we're going to ask Julian to say a few words too, about what we learned over almost 30 years of trying to keep this thing going. Because if we didn't learn anything, we wouldn't be very intelligent.
and we were slow learners. I mean, we only heard of Michael Kaiser about 4 years ago. That was when we, you know, found out that we really didn't have to make all of the money to fund our festival, that it was really okay to ask for gifts. And because we just, you know, I don't know, when we were just first starting, you know, Chuck Bernstein, he said, you aren't going to go around begging for money for your festival, are you? And so we kind of went, no, we aren't. You know, we're going to just like have tchotchkes and, you know, and we're going to starve everybody. But anyway, then we got the Michael Kaiser book, and, you know, it got a much different, you know, well, we were amazing because the ratio between gifts and what our income was from ticket sales and the stuff we were selling was, you know, really, I mean, we were paying for ourselves way more than 60%, which is very unusual.
Just so that you know, it's ticket sales that we're talking about. And you know, I think, well, there's two big things I can tell you that I learned. Number one, when I started it, I was very young and very idealistic, and I thought, if you just make great music, everything will follow. And I found out that that's partially true. You know, you really, there's a business side of it, and it requires great intelligence. And the other thing that I learned was that there's a difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit organization. And that is very, very serious, because if you work with people that don't understand the difference, you will be in trouble. For example, we would have just random people come on the board who had successful businesses, and they'd say, you've got to change your programs so that you get more people in the tent. And as it turns out, I will just say my usual phrase, the difference between for-profit and nonprofit is a for-profit makes music to make money, and a nonprofit makes money to make music. And the minute you get your head turned around in that direction, you can start moving there, because the minute you compromise the art, what's the point? I mean, there's no point to be there. So everybody that's working on it has to have the same goal in mind, that you're trying to present really good music. So I think that's the big lesson that we learned, that we don't have to make 60% of our money with ticket sales, that it's okay to ask. And as a matter of fact, you should feel good about asking people for money. And,
But this is very recent and we are not good at it, but we fortunately have some people around us now that are
we're
better
asking
at it.
people to ask for money.
Yeah.
I think we should have Julian
I
come
just
up.
also wanted to say that, we still are great believers in decentralization of music. We love that, we really have a regional flavor to our, everything that we're doing there, and I think that's still really important. So, Julian, do you want to talk about what it was like and still is?
I mean, he's, for as far as is concerned, the festival has lasted forever.
Right. Well, when you're 0 years old and this thing happens every July, it's impossible to imagine July without something like this happening. And growing up in this atmosphere, let's just say I didn't really watch the game on TV when it was on. I was never, like with all this art and music happening, it was kind of obvious at a very early age that I was going to follow in their footsteps and be a musician as well. And there's a funny story about when I first started playing the drums when I was about 8 years old. We had a fundraiser at our house in Mendocino, and I got to play 2 songs, and then I was told, that's it. And I went to my room and I cried because I wanted to keep playing. And that's kind of how it still is.
Now I'm the one crying.
But yeah, it was having this kind of eclectic taste has formed my musical background. I'm a professional musician living in New York City. I live in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, and I tell everybody I have a very diverse portfolio of things I do to make a living, and I make a nice living. I have a nice place to live. I can eat good food. I'm not a musician who's on the street eating ramen all the time because I can't afford anything. So that's cool. But the only way to do it is, during the day I produce electronic music. At night I play, blues in clubs in New York City. I wrote a piano concerto, got to fly around and perform that. I work with singers. I travel around the world. I work for a huge pop star in Taiwan who is the equivalent basically to Justin Bieber, and going to fly out to LA in a couple weeks to go work on his new record. And but yeah, every year it comes back to the festival, and it's a great opportunity for me because I get to kind of have freedom to do whatever I want, and I don't even know what I'm going to present to these people next summer, but hopefully it'll be cool. And being the festival baby and kind of growing up in this community that's kind of like Nantucket in the sense that it's kind of cut off from the mainland, I've definitely gotten a nice little following in the town and a lot of support. And without that support, I wouldn't be the musician that I am today. And that's about all I have to say to you.
Julian, could you
Yes?
just maybe,
Hello.
I feel like we're on our cell phones.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you could just take a minute or two and tell people where you think music is at today?
Well, who here listens to classical music? Who took music lessons when they were a kid? Okay. Who's heard of Beethoven? Okay, great. Who's heard of Billie Holiday? Okay. Who's heard of John Coltrane? Who's heard of Michael Jackson? Okay. Who's heard of Skrillex? Cool. All right. Yeah. So this was kind of a stupid exercise, but to me, for music on in all the genres there are equal. There's a popular argument where I went to college, NYU, in a music class. Why is Beethoven better than Britney Spears? And if you really try to dive into what it is, you'll find that the argument breaks down. You can't prove any of that. You can't prove that certain music is better than others. And today, when you're going into college and learning about classical and jazz, there's this idea that classical and jazz is higher, it's better. But from what I've learned after being out of school and involved equally in all these different genres is that there's so much great music happening right now in all genres. And the only reason that one wouldn't be able to enjoy music from another genre is because of, aesthetic preference. But if one can get over that, there's just so much cool stuff going on. But, you know, like back in the day when there was something like the Beatles, they were so, it was so centralized what was the big thing was. And now we don't really have that. And I don't know if it's necessary in the future that music has sort of centralized, this is what's happening, like in the early 19th century, Beethoven was happening, you know, and opera in the early 20th century, and then it went to jazz, and then it went to the Beatles and Michael Jackson, and now we're just kind of, you know, there's so many different pockets of music, and in terms of where it's going, I think that each of these scenes will continue to develop in their own trajectories, and I don't know if it's necessary, if it all comes back into kind of one thing, but there's certainly you can make a living being a musician these days, and you just have to figure out how.
Okay. We're now going to play just a little something for you.
Do we want to have question or answer? I don't
know
no
if we
idea
have
what
time.
time
I
it
think we
is.
should play. It's almost 10 minutes to.
Okay, do you want question and answer, or do you want music?
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay,
You know,
I'll play something really fast. Okay, if anybody knows Bach conventions, do they have a favorite? Anybody? Okay, then I'll just play a random one while Alan's getting his horn out. Everybody learns the inventions that studies music, not just even just keyboard player studies.
Susan's father was a great clarinetist, came to the festival, and I had the great pleasure of playing with him. And one of the tunes that he played was this tune, Pennies from Heaven. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's really great to see you here. I'd like to thank Bill. And I can tell you right now, after spending 29 years trying to run an organization, what I see here and what Bill is doing as the leader of this organization is really phenomenal. I mean, these people are great. I think you've got a great organization and a great man to head this. So thank you all for that. Thank you.
And then spread the word tonight at 6. There'll be much more of this music. And come back, okay? Thanks so much.
Okay, great.